Right. So, sorry, I'll just go back to the beginning. So, you're all very welcome this morning. We're delighted to be here. We're doing this presentation this morning in conjunction with the Blue Stack Foundation in Donegal. So, with that, there are a number of the slides that make reference to services that are in Donegal, but I know there's a few folks here from other parts of the country, so don't worry. When those Donegal specific pieces are there, we'll reference to what's available in your own area. Just to acknowledge as well that Inclusion Ireland gets a little bit of funding through the scheme to support national organisations. It's government funding administered by PUBL, and it enables us to do these information sessions. Ordinarily, in non-COVID times, we'd be doing these in community centres around the country, and you know, while there's nothing beats that face-to-face interaction, at least with the Zoom, it allows us to carry on. Sorry, there's someone just there needs to mute. Yeah, I think I've got that one there. Yeah, so I suppose just in relation to a little bit of housekeeping. So as I was saying, we have a chat function for questions, and I can answer them as I go along. And any that aren't answered, we'll have a short Q&A session at the end, and we can unmute everyone then. So just stay on mute until then. And this will be it's a short whistle-stop tour, hopefully of about an hour. And the thing about it is the presentation, and if you haven't got it, just contact my colleague Alex in Inclusion Ireland. He'll send it out to you. There's loads of really good links and further information pieces in it. So just a little bit about Inclusion Ireland to start. We're the National Association for People with Intellectual Disabilities. I'm going to plug our membership. We're on a bit of a membership drive at the moment. So if you're thinking of joining up with us, you can join from as little as €1. So it's €1 for people that aren't in receipt of a wage. So if you're in receipt of a social welfare payment, disability allowance, care allowance, whatever it may be, membership is €1. For all others, it's a tenner. And I think for organisations, it's £100. So we've kind of had a bit of a revamp of how we do that. If you don't want to join us, we put out lots of really good information on Facebook and Twitter, and we've just revamped our website, inclusionireland.ie, so lots of good information on them. And also we have a regular e-newsletter. It goes out monthly. Well, we kind of have two newsletters. Each goes out bi-monthly, but they go out monthly between them. If you're interested in any of that stuff, just give my colleague Alex Carney a ring or an email there, and he'll sort you out. So just to really have a quick look, first of all, at HSE funding in this area. So I suppose overall, there's in and around 250 to 300 million goes towards day services annually. But if we look more specifically at what's happening this year, and would hopefully be happening in future years, the HSE Service Plan 2021, that's where they detail all of their spending. So for 2021, they're anticipating approximately 1,700 school leavers. Now, in that 1,700, there's also a 4-year program they call rehabilitative training. So that 1,700 would include people that have finished their 4 years that require an ongoing HSE service. So 17, just a wee bit over 17 million to fund that in 2021, and it's just under 35 million for a full year cost, and that's been built in. We will be talking later on about New Directions. Now, New Directions is the HSE policy around the reform of day services. So there's a strengthening fund is what they call it, and there's about 20 million of additional funding there available to services to apply for, to do some work to get themselves in line with New Directions. And one other thing that's in the HSE service plan is the continuation of what they call a demonstration project on personal budgets. And we will talk a little bit about personal budgets later on. Personal budgets, so that'll be up to 180 adults with disabilities. Just to note that children were not included in the personal budgets program. So if you've got a young person that is coming to that point in their life, a young person with a disability, and they're leaving school, so I would always say there's a couple of things you can do. So the HSE every year, they do this trawl of schools and special schools to see who's going to require a HSE day service. I would say give the HSE a ring, contact your local HSE manager and ensure that your family member is in the count and that there's provision going to be made for them. Like just to give you an example, I've got a 22-year-old autistic son who also has an intellectual disability. He attended a special school all his life, and he had slipped through the HSE net, so it was a good job we'd rang them about 12 months in advance to ensure he was in there. He wasn't on their radar at all. And then the other thing I'd say is to ensure, if you're engaging with a local service, ensure that it's a person-centered service. And, when we talk about person-centeredness, that's really a picture of how the person wants to be supported in their life, how they want to live their life, and what sort of supports are available to enable that to happen. Just a little bit about COVID-19. It is the big thing that's impacting on all of our lives since February and March of last year. But just to, if your family member is leaving this year, services are still planning an intake in September. A lot of what the HSE would call profiling has been done. And the HSE, I know, are in conversations with schools about trying to do some work on the transition piece and hopeful of getting something done in during the summer period and between now and September. It is likely that there will be reduced numbers still in services. So typically when a young person would leave school to go to a HSE funded day service, they would typically avail of a 30-hour-a-week service. And there may or may not be transport provided in relation to that. Some services do have transport, some don't. But with the COVID situation at the moment, typically people are attending services for about 50% of the 30 hours. And that's to do with, mainly to do with physical space within day services, and then people having to be supported on a one-to-one basis rather than in small groups. The other thing is there may be some different modes of delivery of services or reduced access. So, for example, we're having this meeting today on Zoom. Ordinarily, we would be doing this in a family resource centre or in a hotel up in Donegal. We're not. Because of COVID, we're doing it on Zoom. So some disability services where people have the capability to interact on Zoom are doing some of their activities on Zoom. And there's some really good stuff going on there for people who can engage in that manner. But it is also worth remembering that not everyone can. For some folks, the level of their disability is a barrier to them engaging in a virtual way. So just a little bit about, so that's some of the background stuff that's going on around school leavers this year and in general. So just a little bit of a background to New Directions. So we have had HSE funded day services for many, many years. So what brought about the change? So I suppose up until, let's say, I know when they're saying there, the National Disability Strategy in 2004, but even taking a little step back before that, there was the Commission on the Status of People with Disabilities. And so it kind of came from that and the National Disability Strategy, which has now evolved into the National Disability Inclusion Strategy, that people with disabilities were kind of been taken off for their day service provision and off into segregated services. And there was other stuff going on. Like when we see the other, just below there, there was a review of sheltered services and a review of HSE funded services towards the end of that decade. It's seen that there wasn't a lot of progression for people within services as they existed back then. They were quite often segregated. There were issues around people doing activities that were work-like activities and not being paid for them. For example, a colleague of mine used to attend a very large service in Dublin, and they used to recycle bottles and send them back to Irish distillers for reuse. And they didn't get paid. They just got their disability allowance for doing it, whereas Irish distillers were paying the service. So there was lots of stuff going on to look at day services. And another external thing that prompted it was the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So it started taking a fundamental look at how we treated people. So back then, people with disabilities, they would have been seen as, there was kind of like a very much a charitable kind of model and a medical model placed around this, and very much a protective piece. Whereas the UN Convention, it really looked at people with disabilities as rights holders, and then the state as people who were there to provide for rights. So what that meant was that people should be supported to make decisions around their lives, and and to be part of mainstream society, and to be included in their communities. So just go back to the previous slide. The National Disability Strategy of '04, it was a move towards social inclusion and mainstream access to public services such as housing, transport, health service, income, all of that. And that's kind of that's where New Directions took its lead from. So this was the New Directions report. It came out in 2012. And I suppose what it said was that day services, as it says there, day services were really, really, really diverse. There was some really brilliant work going on within day services, and some really wonderful activities, and people being supported into jobs, and all sorts of great work going on. But there was also other places where there maybe wasn't as good a work going on, and people were I suppose a lot of people would have said that they were bored. They were doing the same thing for years, if not decades, and there was little chance of progression for them, into employment or education. Very little choice. And so I suppose what New Directions was saying was that a lot of good work going on, but also a lot of stuff that wasn't so good going on. And it recommended, New Directions then came up with a recommended model for changing how day services were delivered, so that they could be more in tune with what people were looking for in their lives. So they come up with 12 supports, and there are the 12 supports listed. And what I would say is, if you have an interest, the New Directions report, and there's lots of really good information there on the HSE. And I think I have a link just at the end of the presentation, but even if you just Google HSE New Directions, you can read the report on a lot of the work that's going on. So the first report was about making choices and plans, which we'll come to again later, around person-centeredness, making transitions and progression. So that was one of the things people said, that we're going into a day service, and for those of us who want to progress on to something else, there are very few options there. And even if you think about that in your own life, I haven't had that many jobs in my life, but I've only worked in 2 different places. But I worked in one place, and then I was off on carer's leave, looking after my youngest son for 2 years. When I was due to go back, I said, God, you know what? I'd love to go back to college and retrain. And that's what I did. I went back to college and I retrained, and then I moved on, and I'm working where I am now in Inclusion Ireland. But that option was open to me. So what people with disabilities were saying in New Directions, those options weren't always open to them. So New Directions is about, so if people have got plans and dreams and desires around moving on, they should be supported to do that. It's really about inclusion in your local community, which wasn't a feature of day services up until more recent years. So when we say inclusion in community, it's about, maybe people getting involved in tidy towns in their local community, volunteering locally, accessing CE schemes, doing things that are involved in their local community. And even, some of the programs people are involved in are fitness and well-being programs. They might access and gain membership of a local gymnasium. So it's about going to where everyone else, all other citizens would go. Accessing education was also seen as important. And while there are difficulties there, and we'll go a little bit further into education in a later slide, it's about people having that opportunity and accessing their local ETB, or a local school that offers further education, or even higher education or training or apprenticeships, whatever it may be. And I am mindful that not all of those options are viable for all people, but for those where they are, that they're available to them. Maximizing people's independence. So if we went back to the previous model, it was very much a cared for model. And, when you look at the research, a lot of the research will point to people becoming almost dependent on the support rather than having some positive risk taken in their life around independence. And again, personal and social development, getting people linked in with meaningful roles. When I think of my own roles and my own social development in life, I think of myself as, I'm an employee. I'm a member of my local running club. I'm well known in my local village, my local town. I go to a local gym, and I'm involved in a few other activities. So it's around linking people in so that they can develop in that kind of regard. Ensuring people have good access to health and well-being, that people have the same access to those community services that we all do. There's a few there around training, bridging people into vocational training and work opportunities. There's a lot of work been done on that, and we'll speak about that as well. But not just neglecting and then addressing the creative sides for people, and there are loads and loads and loads of programs that are run by leader companies, by ETBs, and all sorts there around creative expression. And then the last thing was about influence and service policy and practice, that people with disabilities themselves would have an input into that, which is a really good thing, because a lot of the research will tell you that if you want to get a service right from the get-go, involve the people that you're providing the service for. They'll tell you what they want, and it enables you to get it right from the beginning. So as we're saying, New Directions, it focuses very much on the person, and it's a shift away from the system type approach of providing support, and around person-centered planning. These are some of the outcomes that they hope for people, with those 12 supports, and bear in mind, New Directions can't do everything, but it can be. So, you're looking at things, or is a person living in their own home? We know from the data that's there that there are many hundreds and even thousands of people with disabilities who are living at home much longer than their siblings without disabilities, many of them into their 50s and 60s. But specifically around New Directions, is the person experiencing control and choice in their everyday life? Are they allowed to choose the kind of things they want to do? Have this social and civic life, meaningful personal relationships, opportunities for development that we've spoken about. If they want to get into employment, have the opportunities around getting a job or another valued social role. For example, my own son would have quite a significant intellectual disability, and for him, paid employment is a difficult piece at the moment. Now, I'd never rule it out altogether, and hopefully get there sometime. But at the moment, he is linked in with tidy towns, because he quite likes that tidying up of things. It's one of his things, and he also volunteers at the local the local dog pound in taking the dogs that are there for a walk. So there's always something being added, and even in non-COVID times, we attended a park run every Saturday morning in our local park, and we would volunteer there maybe every second week, marshalling out in the course and directing people the right way around the course. So there's always something, some social role there that people can get involved in. And do they have that good quality of life, best possible health, and are they safe, secure, and free from abuse? Now, what I would say is around the whole person-centered planning piece, there are lots and lots of tools that you can do this with. Many services have tools to do this, and other people, they'll do it themselves. And there is a link later on in the presentation, but Inclusion Ireland has just finished doing, we had a seminar series in April. We've just finished the last of them this Tuesday, and we will soon, I think it's either tomorrow or early next week, we're going to be launching a web page. But on that, one of the seminars was specifically around planning. So it'll give you an idea that, if you have a young person and they're maybe around the 14, 15, 16 years, and you want to start that whole planning piece around what they're going to do after school, there's a really, really good video there on some of the things you can be looking at. And these planning pieces, very much the narrative on it is not just to be focusing on, if you're going to engage in a HSE funded day service, but, also looking at those extra things that we've just spoken about, the things that go on in life, and many of these soft things, the things that bring real joy and meaning to our lives. And a lot of that can be done through informal ways, but with New Directions, there are possibilities of services been flexible enough to support people around that. Just one thing about New Directions is that, like a lot of disability services and other social services in recent years, there is a standards that are there, and services report against these to the HSE. Now, one of the things is they're not mandatory, and there's no sanction for if you're well below standard, unlike HICWA's inspection of residential services. So those particular standards, while they're quite wide-ranging and very welcome, there's nobody inspecting against them at the moment. So if you had an issue, there's no one to go to. Just bear with me. I think we have a question there. All right, it was just it was just Karen was making a point around some of the inconsistencies, and I would just say, Karen, a lot of those, and she just had to leave for the moment. But just to say that when I was talking about those inconsistencies in services, that a lot of that was in the pre-New Directions time, and we're now at a point where, while New Directions hasn't been fully funded heretofore, we are at a point where there has been a fair bit of it implemented by services, and there's a fair few projects underway. We'll speak about some of that stuff in a few moments, where services have gone to be more on that person-centered journey. So that, that inconsistent stuff, hopefully a lot of that would be in the past, but, we are still aware that there's quite a few services that are still on the journey to getting in line with the New Directions piece. So person-centered planning, and if you look at the old way of doing business, this is what person-centered planning used to look like, and that's it. You had a choice, and your choice was what we have, and that's it. Thankfully, things are moving in the right direction, and there's a lot of really good stuff going on. So I just let one person in there. So look, in terms of New Direction, this is what you should be expecting from a service when you engage with them. And we'd always say, if we go back to the initial slide, one of the first slides, we were saying if you're a family member or a person with a disability who's going to access a service, there are sometimes opportunities during your final period to go out and sample. If you're lucky enough to live in an area where there are a number of services, you can go out and sample them and see what suits you. And to ensure that they've got your needs and your desires at the heart of what to do. So people can often do that. I know in certain areas of the country, like Donegal, that, you know, because of the geographical nature and the huge size of the county, you might have only one service within a reasonable distance of your house. We're actually the same in County Louth, even though it's the smallest county in Ireland. When my son left school, there was only one service. So, but you should still get an option to have a try of it at the leaving school point. So, what's reasonable to expect from a service? Support that will meet your day-to-day needs. Respect your preferences as an individual and your routines. I'm just going to mute one there. Sorry. I think, John, I'm just going to mute you if you don't mind. I think there's a bit of interference there. So, you know, there should be a person-centered planning piece on your way into a service or when you've just gotten there to see what it is you want to do. And there should be supports in place to enable you to do that. Now, maybe everything mightn't be possible. Like, I did support one young lady at a person-centered planning meeting, and the top piece on her plan was to get married. So unfortunately, the service couldn't facilitate that. But what they could facilitate was for her to access more social opportunities where there was a possibility of her meeting somebody. But again, opportunities to achieve your goals. And like, if it's something the service can't do, they should really be looking at, well, are there possibilities of us doing this? You know, so we'll say, for example, if somebody wanted to work on their literacy and the service didn't have that type of support in place, you know, is there maybe possibility of accessing a Down syndrome latch-on course? Is there possibility of accessing a literacy course in your local education and training board? So there are possibilities there. You know, the service should be looking at ways of supporting you around what it is you want to do. I'm not going to click on that video because it is about an hour long, but just for it's just to highlight to people that when you get the slides and you're looking at this in your own at your own leisure, click on that. There's a really good long video there from Serious Education. Alison Doyle was the person that gave the presentation, and she goes really into depth about looking at person-centered planning, and there's a bit of input there from somebody she did some person-centered planning with. So give you a nice overview of the kind of things you can be discussing with your family member, and that's something you can be looking at in your own time. So just let Seamus back in. So just a little bit on employment, and there are some really good employment schemes knocking around the place, which I think we'll discuss them a little bit in the next slide. But just so you're aware that you know, we are the National Association for People with Intellectual Disabilities. So just looking at open employment in the intellectual disability sector is quite low. It's only 17% of people are in some sort of open employment, and that's not even all of those guys in full-time employment. The national average for the general population is in the high 60s. In the disability in general, it's about 1/3 of people been in some form of employment. So employment levels are quite low. There is a comprehensive employment strategy that the government have, and that's looking at increasing that. It also has some targets around public sector employment. There's some really good supported employment programs. I would say to people, you know, if you're in an area of the country where there are some of the ability programs, a lot of those are about getting people with disabilities closer to the job market. Sadly, and I've highlighted that in the next slide, there are none of those in the Donegal area, but there are some really good ones out there. And we can speak about another couple in a moment. There was a great fear with people around disability allowance and the travel and the medical card and all of that stuff. So just so people know, there has been some changes there to enable, you know, they were seen as really big barriers for people with disabilities getting employment. A lot of those barriers have been removed. So let's say, for example, in the morning, if you were to get a job, you know, and your disability allowance ceased, you would be able to keep your free travel. I think the free travel is for up to 5 years. The medical card you can keep provided your income is below 450 or thereabouts per week. And yeah, so there is some stuff around both of those. But you know, you could come to a period where your earnings get to a certain level and you would lose both of those. So what I would say is, if you're ever worried and wondering about whether employment is going to be worth my while financially, just go on. If you Google employment benefit calculator, the Department of Social Protection has a little calculator. You can put in what benefit you're on at the moment, you know, things like how many children you have and all of that kind of stuff. Are you getting this allowance or that allowance and whatever? Put it into the calculator, put in that I've got a new job, it's got X amount of hours per week, and it'll tell you how much a week you'll be better off. I'm just going to look, I think we might have a comment. Yeah, Jem is just asking, you know, it is good to highlight all of these opportunities that are there, but what if the person doesn't have the supports? When we look in the new directions piece, and again, as I'm saying, it's not implemented right across the board, but what new directions, so let's say, for example, if the person wanted to take up a volunteering role, you know, where new directions would be looking at it is that somebody from their disability service could be supporting them to engage in that role. So rather than them just been attending at a centre all of the time, like I could use the example of my own son. So when he does his voluntary work with his service, somebody from the service supports him to do that. So that's ideally what you'd be looking at. How can the service support him to engage in that? And it's the same around employment. Like, you know, if we're to look at and it's timely that I've just spoken about it. There's another one of the videos that we did as part of our future planning seminar series, and it deals with employment. Now, one of the employers in there is the Walkinstown Association, and they're a disability service provider in the Dublin area, and I think they've got a peer program still running in County Louth. So what they do a number of things. One of the things they do is they support people to get a job. So that support might involve somebody going in and shadowing them until they get proficient at the job, and then, you know, stepping back from that. Now, I will say the people that walk support probably require a little bit less support than some folks. So for folks with the highest support needs, you know, that support would need to be there for a prolonged period. It's a really good video to watch around employment. Another program they do is they've got a traineeship program in Tala Hospital, where I think they take in 9 or 12 people per year, and they go in a rotation. So they spend 3 months working in different roles within the hospital, and hopefully at the end of it, they get a job out of it. They've also done a similar program in Leinster House. It's called the Oireachtas Work and Learning Program, where people with intellectual disabilities are doing various jobs in Leinster House. I believe in the first round of that, most people got jobs in either Leinster House or in other parts of the civil and public service. So they're some of the supports that are available. Now, as I'm saying, New Directions is still patchy in where it's been implemented, and some service providers are a wee bit further along the road and better at doing that, but some of the others are catching up, and they should be getting there. Sorry, just next slide. So I've just bear with me a second. I keep forgetting to press the button on this. So I'm just going to re-share. I've just forgotten to share the sound. So this is just a 2-minute video, and it's a video that Inclusion Ireland developed as part of some research we did on 19 stories of social inclusion. But it's just Michael's story of him having a job and what he does.
Stories of social inclusion. Michael's story. Michael's 13 years of work in the local centre has contributed to his sense of belonging in his community. Michael is well known and included, and this is further strengthened by the contribution he makes by volunteering at the local GAA club.
My name is Michael Connolly. My interest is walking. Walking is my life. I am happy there. 2 days a week, Mondays and Thursdays. My favourite thing is about working stacking the bricks, stacking the vehicles, boxes, cardboards. The job is getting serious, making the customers happy. Being part of the team is that make me feel happy. Becca Hannigan is my course worker now in Florida.
Mikey is here 13 years. He's actually here longer than me. Mikey is Mikey. We all love him. All the staff get on great with him. He loves all of us as well. He comes in and he interacts. He says hello to us all and tells us about his weekend, and he loves working. He's just like any other ordinary staff member, and he's brilliant. We all get on great with him, and he's just evolving, and he wants to do more and learn more all the time. So he's really good and he's great.
Michael will be known on a first name basis in the town here, which is brilliant. He works, as I say, in Centra, so he has a great relationship with staff, delivery men, customers, general members of the public, who most people know him by his first name, and he's part of the furniture, I think, down there now in a very quality way. Very fortunate to have such a good employer that values him very highly, and I mean, he goes to Christmas parties with these colleagues at work. He's very much included in the staff team. People depend on him as much as he depends on them, so I think that's pretty cool, you know.
I'm working in the DHIA government as well, and I work out pupil class as well. I walk around, say hello. Yeah, like talking to people. I have to be nice to them. We post book is a big pocket, like life savings. Yeah. I do that on the Thursday evening after work.
People regard Michael as just an ordinary member of the team, of the staff team, of the public. I think his disability has faded into the background quite a bit because of his personality. He's just regarded as one of the lads at work.
It's a serious work. I work in the work, I feel happy, smart, and if you hard things, and you get smiling, make you feel happy and glad.
So that was Michael's story, and just while it shows him working there, there's a lot goes on to make that happen. So, and an example of that would be, you know, for example, the Blue Stack Foundation have a program where people can get trained to work, you know, and they have a working cafe there where people can get involved in, you know, the scheme to learn those work skills, and you know, and it is one of the growth areas that are there. But even in Michael's case, there was a lot of work went on in the first number of years where he would have been involved there, and now, you know, because he's gotten so used to the job, those support needs have diminished quite a bit, and it's just for those couple of days of the week, it's the Centra piece. Just sticking on the theme of employment. So, while this is focus here in the Northwest, I am mindful there are a couple of other folks from around the country. And I would say that, you know, employability are in most parts of the country. Just Google Employability Ireland. You'll see they've got offices in Dublin, right around the country. So what are employability now? Employability, it's not for everybody. So the person that is going to employability needs to be job ready. So what they do is they help the person find a job, might help them with their CV a bit, might make them aware of jobs, and might be an interface with the employer. So they make the employer aware of there is a wage subsidy scheme where the government will pay a significant proportion of the person's wage. So just if you're in the Northwest, there is an employability in Sligo. That's the closest one to you in Donegal. And you know, you'll get their details there at that link that's highlighted. But the one thing about it is, unlike Michael and unlike, you know, the Blue Stack that we've just spoken about there, there's not that on the job training. So your job coach with employability isn't going to go in and work with you. And as I said, you need to be job ready. So if you're going to employability, possibly you might have done a CE scheme or done some voluntary work, or, you know, we'll say, for example, a lot of people volunteer in a local charity shop if you're going to go into retail, which is another great growth area. So the job ready, and I think you have to work a minimum of 19 hours per week. So maybe not suitable for everybody, but it is an option that's there. Just another option is then, and is national. We've mentioned our friends in Blue Stack already. Another option there is National Learning Network, and they're pretty much countrywide. So if you're in an area of the country, just look up National Learning Network. They have a really good website there. Even through that link there, that link brings you to the Letterkenny Centre, but with a couple of clicks, you'll get to the one closest to you. So they've got a couple of employment programs that bring people closer to the workplace. And again, well, Learning Network would have a number of supports in place, you know, for folks with the most significant support and care needs. It's maybe, you know, maybe not the most appropriate for guys in that kind of band. So just moving on a little bit, and this is an option. It's not an option for everybody, because personal budgets it involves a significant amount of work. Now, again, this was part of our seminar series. I haven't got the video linked in just yet because we've only just finished it on Tuesday. My communications colleague hasn't finished off with it just yet, but we will have a video on it very soon. And the parent that was involved, that presented on personal budgets, did say that there is a good bit of work in it. So it's provided for in the Value for Money report. That was a review of disability services back around 2012, 2013 kind of time. So what is a personal budget? It's basically the person has their own money, their own budget. They can create their own service. There's three options. When we say controlling your own service, there are three options. So you can have the budget paid into a broker. There's not very many brokers in the country at the moment. I'm only aware of two. And they are the AT network. You can Google them, really good. And there's also Possibilities Plus, and they've got a small amount of people that use their services. So what the broker does is they help you recruit staff, they help you manage your money and all that back of house accounting stuff and all that. Now there is a charge for a broker, or let's say, for example, you had a personal budget of, we'll pick a nominal fee of 10 grand. You could go to someone at the Blue Stack Foundation and say, I've got 10 grand to support me for a day's services. What can you do that'll help me achieve some of my goals with this money? Or you could go to another service like Rehab Care or Praxis Care or St. John of God's or whoever it is that's in your local area, and ask them what they can do. So that's option two. And the last option is that you can control the money yourself and spend it at will. So you're basically managing and controlling it yourself. So with something like that, you'd probably have to set up like a little mini company, but the money would have to be accounted for, and it involves a little bit of extra work. But you'll get possibly the best bang for your buck and the best amount of control over it. So at present, there's a demonstration project, and you've seen in slide one, we said that's for up to 180 people on a personal budget, and we'll see how that goes. It has been kind of paused slightly because of COVID. We're aware of a number of people that have been trying to contact the personal budgets office to no avail. We believe the people who were working in it were redeployed to other COVID services, and I'm just not 100% sure if they're back as yet. But it is an option for people there if they want it. As I was saying, it involves a bit more work, but allows you a lot more control. And all the details are at that link. And if you keep an eye on Inclusion Ireland's website, there will be a video around this. There's another crowd you could look at, and it's the Inclusive Living Network. And they're a group of folks that would be operating in this space. Just moving Slightly then to further education. Again, further education, the more your disability impacts on your life, probably the fewer options you have in this regard. And hopefully that's something that will be getting developed, because I've seen there is a new strategy coming out quite soon. So hopefully there'll be a bit of development there. So what's there at the moment? At present, you've no entitlement to education after 18. That was set out in the Synod case. So what is there is we've got a HEAD and DARE. So that's the Association of Higher Education and Disability. I can't remember what a HEAD stands for, but anyway, DARE is the Disability Access Route to Education. And that's a load of supports that are there for people with disabilities to access education. You know, and one we've mentioned there is the Fund for Students with Disabilities, which is a wide-ranging fund. It can include everything from scribes to equipment to reasonable accommodations to PA support. All of that kind of stuff is in there. There's access officers in every third level institute in the country. And then in a number of colleges around the country, there are specific courses for people with intellectual disabilities. One of the bonuses of those courses is they've got really, really good links into employers. So I know, for example, the one in Trinity, that quite a few people get work after the course. And in really high quality employers like A&L, Goodbody and Mason, Hayes and Curran, and places like that. So there's a lot of really good links in there. There are none of those in the Northwest at the moment. But if you want to look them up, it's inhef.ie. And just at the bottom there, those guys did present at Inclusion Ireland's future planning seminar. So there's a nice video there of about an hour long. It'll tell you all about the courses, what they do, their links to employment, and where they operate out of. But as I said, unfortunately, none in the Northwest, which is a shame, because you know, there are 2 institutes of technology and a teacher training college in the Northwest. So it is a bit of a shame that there isn't anything there in the Northwest. So some of the other further education opportunities that are open. So if we look, for example, there's Youth Reach. You know, while Youth Reach, there's traditionally a view that it's I suppose for young people that have just literally fallen out of education through discipline issues or whatever it may be. You know, it's not strictly for that. So there is an option there, you know, for people who have disabilities, you know, and there's a decent bit of support there in the likes of Youth Reach around counselling, smaller classes and all of that. Not saying it's an option for everybody, but it is an option there that some people undertake. And there was a bit of research for the NCSE a few years back, and there was a few young people that were engaging with Youth Reach and found it quite useful. Moving on a little bit in life, so there is, and again, these are available through your local education and training board. There are VTOS schemes, and there are also adult literacy courses. These courses are available to everybody. I have a colleague, and when he started with us, he started with Inclusion Ireland long before I did, 15 years ago, I think it was. Because he experienced his education in the 60s, you know, there was a poor level of education for people with intellectual disabilities then. But he accessed an adult literacy course through the City of Dublin VEC, as it was at the time, and he learned to read and write. So, you know, never shut the door on education. Personally, I went back to education at the age of 38. Good friend of mine, his dad went back and did a degree in his 70s. So never shut the door on education. It's always there. And there are post-leaving cert courses. Not all of them are accessible, but there are some of them do start at level 3 and then build on to level 4 and level 5. So there's some really good options there. In most of those, you know, you will get access to free books and materials except the post-leaving cert courses. Because Donegal's on the border, there are cross-border options, and have a look at them, because some of those courses do start at a level that is suitable for people with intellectual disabilities, you know, so that they can get those foundational skills and then build it on to the next level and the next level. So they're also worth looking at, and there's reasonably decent support. I think there may be some fees for those courses though, so that's something just to bear in mind. If you're bamboozled by all of that, Donegal ETB, and I would say that applies to any ETB around the country, they have an adult guidance service. Go in and talk to them, ask them what's available, and they'll let you know. So just kind of outside of the education sphere a little bit, and the future planning, there is a national advocacy service, and just to make people aware of it, because, you know, one of the things they can do is, if you're experiencing difficulty with your current service, or experiencing difficulty accessing a service, accessing an education service, accessing anything, they can support you around that. So it's regardless of diagnosis. There is an advocate in every county in Ireland. There's more than one in some counties, but Donegal does have an advocate. Unfortunately, you can't ring that person direct. You have to go through their main piece. And that's one of the things they say on their literature. They'll make sure the person is listened to by the service provider. You mightn't always get your way, but you know, you will get your voice heard. So that's one of the things they can do, is we're saying they can help people access appropriate supports in their day service, help them access meaningful supports in their community. Now, just as a point of note, they advocate for the person and not the family. So, you know, they work with the person themselves. What I would say though is, for folks that have got a higher support need and maybe communication is a difficulty, they will work with the family in, you know, you're the communication partner, and you may be able to tell them what the will and preference of the individual is. That's their contact details there. So if you're in Donegal, or you might be in Waterford, or wherever you may be, you ring up, you tell them where you are. I would always say that if you're ringing on behalf of somebody, have that conversation with the person first, because one of the questions that the NAS will usually ask is the person aware you're ringing on their behalf? But parents will often say to me, we're fed up fighting, we're fed up banging our head of a brick wall. If that's the case, you know, get the National Advocacy Service involved. These guys are paid advocates, they're professionals. It's what they do for a living, and they will work on that particular issue for your family member. We're just coming towards the end. As I was saying, it's a whistle-stop tour, this, but it's really, it's one of those things about saying to people, look, these are some of the options that are available to you. This is what you can expect, and then giving some pointing you in the right direction. I will say, for the folks in Donegal, I'm just looking at that one there, the top one on the right, the Donegal Directory of Services that the Blue Stack Foundation were involved in putting together. It's a really impressive list of services. There's everything in there from, you know, disability services to education services to mainstream health services, and everything in between, children's services, TUSLA services, adult services. It's really, really good. As I was saying, in the coming days, Inclusion Ireland's website, we're going to have a dedicated web resource there around future planning and options. And it covers right across the spectrum, from some of the really innovative work that's been done in HSE services to people who are in employment and the supports that they get, and some of the really good practices that are there. So even if your local service isn't maybe offering that type of supports at present, you can go to them and say, look, why don't you go and talk to these guys over here and see what they are doing? And maybe that can be replicated up where we are. You know, because what I would say is, you know, if it can be done in one place, there's no reason why it can't be done in another. And look, I know funding is always something that is an issue, but you know, there are always possibilities. Another piece we have there, stories of social inclusion. Some really, some of the more good news pieces that are there. I would say that the New Directions home page is an absolute mine of information. So it is. There's lots of, and you can see some of the developments that's going on there. And this is the one I was telling you about earlier, INHEF. It's the network of those courses in higher education institutes that are supporting people with intellectual disabilities to take part. And one of the really great stories from that was when we were speaking with the folks in Trinity about that, they were citing a story where there were triplets from somewhere in the Dublin area, and they'd been to the same primary school and they'd been to the same secondary school, and now it had come to the higher education piece. There was one of the triplets had an intellectual disability and thought she wouldn't be able to go to the same college, but all three of them actually entered Trinity on the same day because they have the accessible course there. So this is the guide that I was saying that was done with the Blue Stack Foundation and the local Children and Young Persons Services Committee. That's the kind of stuff that's in it. You know, even if you're not aware of all of your entitlements, you know, around disability allowance, various financial supports and all of that, that's all detailed in there. There is so much more in it. It's a really great guide. I'd say it's always one to have a shortcut to on your desktop for in case you ever need it. And by the way, we should never forget that one of the greatest guides you'll ever get, and I know the Blue Stack Foundation have a parents support forum. Other parents, you know, one of the greatest guides you'll ever get. Speak to people that have been through it. They'll be able to, you know, they have that local information. Oh, I spoke to such and such a person in the HSE, they helped me out, or this person in the local ETB is really brilliant. Always avail of the support of other parents, and you know, I do always find they're really giving of their time. Just for some of the more formal guides, and I think this is the last slide, if you're wondering about any of this stuff, have a look on the National Council for Special Education's website. They have a lot of really good guides in there. Now, well, I would say it's quite generalized, but in those guides, there are generally hyperlinks that'll bring you to places that are really, really, you know, that are really, really good. You know, if you're interested in employment, you can go and look at the employability options. If you're interested in HSE day services, it'll bring you there. So they've got a really a decent view, and the guides are pretty simple. They're really good. They're easily accessible. They're good to read. They're not academic journals. They're nice pieces to have a look at and give you a bit of guide. They'll point you in the right direction of where you need to go for the further piece. Now, I think that is, yeah, so that's it for the moment. I'll go into the question piece now if anyone just has, and I'll stop recording at that point as well. If there's any, you know, if you're on your way home and you're thinking, God almighty, I should have asked this, that, or the other, give us a shout in Inclusion Ireland. We're only too delighted to take questions. So I'm just going to stop the record at that point.